Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the podcast. My name is Warren Pohl, and I will be your host for this show, where my guest today is none other than Charlie Redding.
You've got to set goals that scare you. Goals that scare you that aren't going to kill you is where you should be aiming.
Now, Charlie is a financial planner. Yes, I really did say that. Not only is he just a financial planner, he's an exceptionally good financial planner, which is a beautiful thing. But what on earth is Charlie doing on a podcast all about sports and performance? Well, funny you should ask. Reason is, Charlie's also an 11-hour Ironman athlete. He's a guy who has been incredibly successful in business. But he got to a point where the business success was great, but life and looking after himself, they were less good. He wasn't spending enough time with his family. He wasn't healthy. He wasn't in good shape. He was overweight. He wasn't happy about that. Business was great. Everything else had unfortunately been sacrificed to get there. So he's a pretty driven guy. He's not someone who takes anything lying down. Once Charlie had worked this out, he set about learning how he could make these changes. Changes to his diet, changes to his health. These are things that in very short order led him to that 11-hour Ironman. All the while, still maintaining and increasing the business success. Now, people like Charlie can make this sort of thing look easy, but what I love about this interview is it makes the point that in some respects, it is the basics of what you need to do to achieve, not just in business, but in sport, performance, health, and the rest of your life. They're quite simple. The hard bit is discovering what works for you, doing the learning to understand what that is, and then, this is the most important bit, turning up every day and taking action, and also taking feedback from that action to see what works. This is where Charlie wins big, and it's what he really delivers in this conversation. Because so much content out there in our sporting world is often about lessons from sport that you can apply to the rest of your life. But what Charlie does is he took all of his lessons from business, everything that allowed him to grow a very successful financial planning business, and then he applied those lessons to then revamping himself and making himself into a very serious age group Ironman contender. Along the way, there'll be plenty of adventure to be shared and loads of great tips. For example, if you were worrying about knocking out a fast marathon, let alone a fast marathon at the end of an Ironman, whoever knew that if you applied a very good run-walk strategy, you could knock it out of the park. You'll be learning all these things and more from Charlie's story in this show, all with his trademark delivery, thoughtful, considered, and really neatly incisive. So look, let's get on with that. But before we do, this show is brought to you by 33 Fuel Natural Sports Nutrition, the absolute finest sports nutrition on the planet. So look, do check this show out, do love it, do enjoy it, do rate it, do share it with your friends, but make sure at some point you get to 33fuel.com to make sure you've got the best possible fuel for your physical challenges ahead. With all that out of the way, let's get into the show with Charlie Redding. Charlie Redding, thank you so much for joining us from the comfort of your home office at your standing desk.
You're very welcome. I'm looking forward to it. It's good to see you again.
You too. It was great when we were able to actually catch up in the real world for a ride. That feels like a very long time ago now.
Doesn't it? Yeah, it was. That was. I really enjoyed our exploration of Rutland on the bike. So yeah, it was, and it feels like it was slotted in amongst a year of not many experiences like that. So yeah.
Yeah. No, we found a good window and a good sunny day. It was good to get out in the countryside, especially escape some of the London traffic and smog, which makes the cycling a bit less fun at times.
I would imagine so. I'm not sure I'm going to be cycling in London anytime soon.
Well, certainly I'm not either at the moment. It's all turbo time. But what I wanted to get into here, there's so often that people take lessons from sport and translate them to business. There's a multi-million-pound business in former professional sports stars talking to business leaders and how to make your business better. But you had a very strong business background before your own sporting background came along, as you took up cycling, triathlon and Ironman. And I really wanted to look at the lessons that you took from your business background and how you then applied them into the sporting side of things.
Brilliant. I'd be more than happy to explore that.
So I think, with a little bit of background, I mean, we don't need to do a full CV here, but you grew up a farm boy, went to Newcastle University and looking to follow in your family footsteps, degree in agriculture.
Yeah, that's not been very helpful since then, actually. It seemed like the path of least resistance. I mean, they say it takes a lazy man to find the shortest route, and picking agriculture as a degree was definitely the shortest route for me. It was the shortest route to getting to a university that I could have some fun at, and there wasn't a whole lot more thought that went into it. And there hasn't been a whole lot more thought that's gone into it since, actually.
Well, because it wasn't long after that, you came back and you did take the step of, saying to your family, this is not for me. I'm not going to be in the family business. I'm going to do something else, which shows already, that there's an independence of spirit in there.
Yeah, I soon worked out I was too soft to farm. It just wasn't for me. And I really, I kind of left, deciding I left to go around the world and decided that I didn't want to farm, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And to be honest, I came back from traveling not really knowing much more about what I wanted to do, other than kind of reaffirming that I didn't want to farm. But during my travels, I've met an Uncle Bill that I'd never met before, because he'd moved out to Australia, and he definitely inspired me in that he sowed this seed of saying, he ran his own business, he was very successful, but he also took 3 months of the year off each year to travel the world and travel Australia. And I'd never really thought about the concept of the fact that if you run your own business, you control how much time you spend in that business. And the idea of taking 3 months a year to travel was just amazing. And I thought, and so that was like a seed growing in me over the course of that traveling. Like, okay, how can I, essentially engineer what I saw in Uncle Bill and have my own business so that I can control how much time I spend doing what I want to do.
And from there, Uncle Bill's, I have an Uncle Bill as well, actually, although he's on Guernsey, so a slightly smaller island than your Uncle Bill. But your Uncle Bill's, he's provided that sort of eye-opening moment where you think, I'm interested in this. This takes you into financial services, which is not known as always being the most exciting of places. And you were able to go into that and see that actually, for something that a lot of people see as either a bit ordinary or plain, that was part of the reason that a lot of the bigger businesses did it without a lot of, shall we say, heart or attention. You wanted to change that, and that was the genesis for your own company, which must have been, when was that, 2005?
2006.
Right.
2006. So yeah, I fell into financial services entirely by mistake, and it was purely because the guy that I was chatting to was selling the concept of being self-employed. And if I hadn't met my Uncle Bill, I don't know whether I would have. I mean, I always understood the concept of self-employed because growing up on a farm, that was, the structure that I understood. But I never really thought about it in a straightforward divide of being employed versus self-employed. And so really, that's the only reason I ended up in financial services was because of this self-employed concept. And I very quickly realized that actually I really enjoyed helping people save for their future, plan for their retirement, protect their family. But what I didn't like was the way that the industry went about it. And it was basically shoveling products down people's throats. And it was, this commission hungry sales world that didn't seem to be, didn't seem to have the client at the heart of it. It seemed to be, more about lining your own pockets than lining the pockets of your clients. And so I just found that, I enjoyed the role. I didn't think it was being done very well, and I didn't think the companies in the industry were very good. And so, in 2006, having spent a bit of time exploring different options and looking at different companies, I decided that actually the only way I could do it the way I wanted to do it was by setting up my own business. And so, Efficient Portfolio was born in 2006.
And so from there, you grew that business. And I think one of the areas that we've connected is you have I feel a strong beginner's mind and a thirst for knowledge and growth and development, which has led you into reading, studying, courses, whether it's simple stuff like podcasts or week-long retreat business courses, whatever it's been, you've always been looking to improve in that space. And that brings you in 2011 to unleash the power within with a certain Tony Robbins. Now, some people listening may be aware of these things. It's not, this is not the area of our podcast that we normally look at. We're sports and human performance, but Tony Robbins is very much about life performance. Tell us a little bit about that event and maybe give it a quick bit of colour for people who've never heard of this idea before.
Okay, so just to give you a bit of context and a bit of lead into that. So when I set up Efficient Portfolio, I realised that I needed to learn about the concept of running a business. It was no good just being a financial planner. I needed to be able to run a business too. So I started doing things like the Strategic Coach Program, which was created by a Canadian guy called Dan Sullivan, and that was kind of getting me in the right business mindset. I was reading more and more books, and actually the first personal development book I ever read was Awaken, the Giant Within by Tony Robbins, given to me by one of the guys that I met in the industry fairly early on. And so, and at the time when I read that book, I was like, it'd be amazing to see Tony Robbins or go to see him at his Fiji island. But I never really thought much more of it. And then in 2011, having not done any events in the UK for a number of years, he announced that he was going to do a Unleash the Power Within again in London. And I thought, well, I've got to get on that. And, for those people that don't know who Tony Robbins is, he's this 6'7" American guy. He's got teeth bigger than I am. And this event, Unleash the Power Within, is made most famous by the firewalk. So over the course of that 4 days, you walk across burning hot coals. But actually, it wasn't the firewalk that really made the most difference to me during that event. It was more about what gets called the Dickens process, because of its similarity to the Christmas Carol. And he's essentially taking you back in time and making you realize the decisions that you've been making to get you where you are today. And then he makes you map those forward 20 years and says, well, okay, what are those decisions that you're making today going to create 20 years from now? And I was stood there, having been working on the business, but working every hour that God sent. I was married with 2 young children at the time, but not really spending any time with them. I was in the worst shape of my life, 3 stone heavier than I am today. And it just made me completely reevaluate everything that I needed to do, because I realized, in fact, he made us create this image of what our life would look like 20 years from now if we kept along on this trajectory with these limiting beliefs, as he describes them. And I could just picture myself in this 1-bedroom flat, weighing 20 stone. My gut was hanging over the side of the chair. I was surrounded by pizza boxes. Carol and the girls had left me. The business had folded. And that was the image that basically said, no, you got to change things around here. And so I left Unleash the Power Within, knowing that I needed to redress the work-life balance piece and also the health and fitness piece. And it kind of sprung from there.
Well, you've summed that up beautifully, because I was actually, I have a copy of one of your books here, Entrepreneurial Happiness. I was going to pull out the paragraph where you describe the Dickens process, and funnily enough, it must have been very well burnt into your memory, because what you've described there is almost word for word what you wrote in that book. So they are, you've built a successful business, but you've realised it's taken a toll on your life, it's taking a toll on your health. You're nowhere near where you want to be physically. You're saying 3 stone overweight, that's a fair amount to be carrying around. If you map that forward, continue on that path, it's not going to work. So this is where I feel we get into the meat of all this, which is where the lessons that you learn in that business world and development there then get translated into, now how do you upgrade your life, but also upgrade your health, which takes you into fitness. So tell us a little bit about the beginning of the steps of that journey.
Well, I suppose one of the things that I'd been doing prior to going to Unleash the Power Within was very clearly writing down my goals. It was something that I was taught at Strategic Coach every quarter, rewriting out my goals. But they were always really business related. Not all business related, but there was some personal stuff in there, but generally it was business related. And one of the things that I started to realize was that actually I'd got to be smarter with how I built my goals. So that I needed to have personal goals and business goals, but actually breaking that down more. And Tony talks about actually creating these roles within your life. So when you come to planning your goals, you have goals for being a super dad, and goals for being fit and healthy, and goals for being an amazing husband, as well as goals for being an amazing business owner, or a great financial planner, or an entrepreneur. So what you do is you create these roles in your life, and then you base your goals on that. And so goal setting had proved extremely beneficial to my business life. And I thought, well, and the perfect example of that is my first book, which is The Dream Retirement, because I was at my strategic coach workshop in about 2012, probably would have been the September 2012 workshop, I think. And one of the fellow entrepreneurs that was on my workshop announced and brought to the workshop his newly published book. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And I could instantly see the impact that could have on his business, just from me sitting there thinking, he's now the expert in that subject. He is the expert. And if I wanted advice on that subject, I know I would go to him, because I now see him as the expert. And I thought, that's incredible. And so I wrote, as I did every quarter, I wrote on my 3-year goals for the first time during that workshop to have a book published. Now, this is somebody that's dyslexic, never really written anything at all, certainly had no idea how to create a book, publish a book, or even what to write a book on. But I wrote on my 3-year goals to have a book published. So then I had to chunk it back and go, right, okay, so 1 year, what do I need to do? I've started writing the book. I need to have the subject. I need to have mapped it all out. And then this quarter, what do I need to do? Well, I need to have just identified the subject. And the great thing about the goal writing and goal setting is that that means that you're programming your subconscious to say, this is what's important. And while your conscious brain is going off and doing the stuff that is urgent, your subconscious brain is then working on the stuff that's important, so that when the right opportunities come along, it goes, oh, hang on, you were looking for a subject for the book. This is the thing. And you go, yeah. So the subject of retirement came up. And really, I can absolutely see the same principle with when it came to getting fit and healthy. So, for example, I started cycling more, and I was kind of doing, first year I bought a bike, and I set myself the challenge of doing a 100-mile bike ride to the coast as a charity thing. Next year, I wanted to do a couple of longer bike rides. And then again, the year after, I think I got in the third year, I did the Dragon Ride, which is 142 miles through the Welsh mountains. I was like, right, okay, now I've got to set my goals for the next year. I was thinking, well, do I just now, I've done 142 miles, do I just do a longer ride? And at the time I was reading Rich Roll's Finding Ultra. And, I always described running as sport with the fun bits taken out. So I'd never been a runner.
Well, there's your limiting belief right there, hey?
Exactly. Exactly.
Coming from a man who just knocked out a cheeky 41 mile on Sunday, but I don't want to spoil the ending of this story. Sorry.
And then I'd not swum really since school, and I was not particularly brilliant at it then. Yeah. But I was reading this Rich Roll, Finding Ultra, and I thought, do you know what? It'd be quite cool to do a triathlon. I know nothing about them, but I thought, and he went off and went to the extreme and ended up doing an ultra Ironman, so double Ironman across 3 days. And I thought, a friend of mine at school had done an Ironman years before, and I thought, well, I know it's stupid, and it's so stupid I'm not even going to tell anyone about it. But on my 3-year goals, I put Ironman down, and then I just worked it backwards again in the same way that I'd done with the book. And I said, right, okay, so if I was going to do an Ironman 3 years from now, in the next year, really, I've got to do a couple of sprint triathlons. I've definitely got to do an Olympic triathlon. And if I manage to get my way through that, I maybe sneak in a half Ironman this year. but then the next, so that kind of is setting the stage, and that's all I did. And so goal setting definitely was the key to getting my fitness and my sporting life and my health and nutrition right, in the same way that it was for business.
That's brilliant. So that same framework applied to a different subject. You take the goal setting, bring it over to the sport. And within that, something else you mentioned was the idea of measuring things, which in many ways is essential. When we run, ride, lift, whatever you do, you want to know the numbers. Maybe it's just a guy thing, I don't know. What were the numbers? Where was I last week? Where am I this week? But you had a discipline in that from business as well. Did you find that was another one that carried across?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that I was taught in business was to really know my key numbers. And in entrepreneurial happiness, I talk about our successful business scorecard. So this is a line of numbers that we do every week within the business. And I look at those numbers because that transparency through the business just gives me incredible clarity. One of the ways that you can grow your business is to be able to delegate more, and we'll perhaps come on to the subject of delegation later on. But the only way you can delegate more is when you've got the ability to still know what's going on. And that, the easier you can make the knowing what's going on bit, the more you can delegate and the more you can give up, because you can see what's going on in the business. And so this line of numbers in the successful business scorecard, I can look at whether I'm working or not. I could take 6 months off, and as long as I was looking at that line of numbers, I'd know what was going on in the business. And absolutely, so you've got to measure everything, and particularly with your marketing. So the amount of businesses I see that market, in a particular way, and I've said to them, how is that marketing working for you? Well, I don't really know. Well, you've got to measure it. With your marketing, it's absolutely vital you're measuring the success. Are you getting a return on the money that you're investing in that particular marketing strategy? And even better, split testing it. Do 2 similar strategies and work out which one works better. So absolutely, you've got to measure everything in business, because even if you don't, sometimes we'll think of something and we'll say, well, I wonder if this principle would work. And we haven't necessarily measured the numbers with that in mind. But because we've got the numbers, it's very easy to then go back and say, well, actually, yes, we can learn from this, or we can, understand the benefit of this by the previous numbers. And it also really helps with your goal setting, because when you say, well, okay, if we want to increase our new business levels by 50% next year, you can then work back the numbers and say, because that's quite a difficult concept. But if, for example, in our business, we know that we need to generate an additional 300 client quick inquiries, because we know that 300 client inquiries will turn into that 50% increase, then it's much more tangible. We know what we can do. And the same in business, same in sport, using training peaks to really understand your numbers and help you model what you need to do. Training peaks was incredibly powerful for me doing my Ironman, just because I could map everything out, and I knew that if I did what I put into training peaks, I was going to hit the targets that I'd set myself.
And in terms of those targets, Ironman is triathlon as a whole, Ironman specifically just because of the distance. There really is an additional element there, which is managing the logistics and managing your effort across the course of what's going to be a long day. Did you at any point look at variables? Did you look at the course profile, and did you start to then break that down by comparing performances on training peaks, or whether your runs or your swims or whatever, to work out what your target pace needed to be, and how in business, in a way, I want a 50% extra increase. I know what creates profit, therefore I need this much more of that to create my 50% increase. Could you look at all the data you had ahead of your Ironman and work out what the reasonable stretch goals were for your paces, how you would break up your splits, how you would then map that into the course and execute on the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think doing your first Ironman is really difficult because it's so difficult to quantify the impact of all of the events combined. Because you're never going to go do an Ironman and in training for you're not going to do a whole Ironman. It's just not going to work. So yes, it allows you to translate that through and say, because you can analyze the numbers, you can start to say, well, okay, this is what I can predict. Turns out my prediction wasn't very accurate, but
we'll come to that in a bit in rather a good way.
Yes, it was in a good way. So I was aiming for a sub 12-hour first Ironman, and actually a client of mine that's a very experienced runner got me really worried because I'd said that. He'd asked me at one of our client workshops about this Ironman. He said, what time are you hoping to do? And I said sub 12 hours. And he looked at me and went, that's going to be tough. And I knew that I knew his running pedigree, and I was like, oh, maybe I've over-egged this. This is, so I'd gotten little confidence of actually getting sub 12 hours going into it. So when I got closer and closer to the finishing line and thought, actually, I might even be on for a sub 11 hour here. This is going to be a whole hour ahead faster than my stretch goal. It just went really, really well. It went better than I could have expected. In fact, I thought I'd actually got under the 11-hour mark because Carol was waiting by the finish line and expecting a hug to say congratulations. We hadn't looked at the time, of course. And I was I'm looking at my watch going 10:59. I forget the cuddle. I've got to get to that line. And my watch said 10:59. And it was only when a friend pointed out afterwards on Facebook that I'd got 11:01 on the official time that I realized. I don't know quite where the difference arose, but yeah.
I reckon they moved the timing map when you weren't looking.
I don't know what happened, but anyway, I'll still take the 11:01. But interestingly, I think it comes back to that data thing, doesn't it? And for me, it was really difficult to have the confidence that I was going to be able to get round an Ironman at all. But Training Peaks and programming it in and speaking to somebody that knew what they were talking about, because I really didn't. But saying that, if we get to a fitness score, a CTL in Training Peaks of 100 or more, you should be okay to get round an Ironman. So I just kept, I built the training plan with that in mind. I ended up going a little bit over 100, but not far. But that then gave me the confidence that I could get round the track.
So you feel like you can get round it. Did you have set times and pacings that you were looking to hit? And first question, did you have those?
I did, yeah.
And in terms of those, did you also have any leeway in there? I think this is where it gets really difficult to also let how you felt on the day influence you one way or another in a positive way, because sometimes it's just twice as hot as you were planning, or maybe it's chucking it down with rain, or maybe you're having an amazing day but you need to store something in the tank for later just in case it actually turns out to be a really tough day. Numbers are great, but also there's a very human element in an Ironman. How did you balance those, and were there any business parallels that helped you do that? Because a lot of business is a leap of faith as well.
Yeah, businesses are a leap of faith, and it comes back to setting goals again, doesn't it? A better analogy maybe is the my first ultra run, which I did on Saturday, as you rightly pointed out. So in business, we'll try and set goals, but we'll then set stretch goals. So we've got, with goals, you've got to set goals that scare you. Goals that scare you, that aren't going to kill you, is where you should be aiming. Because the best things happen when we're outside our comfort zone. And it's very easy with goals to set them where they're not really, they are actually reasonably achievable. But if you always set goals and you always hit them, then actually not that much magic happens. It's better to set much bigger goals and miss it by 10%, because, well, as they say, if you aim for the stars, you'll hit the moon. So for me, it's about stretch goals. And this weekend, I did the long run because, as you know, I've entered my first proper ultra event, which is the Arc 50 around the Cornish coastline in January. And the furthest I'd ever run until last weekend was 26 miles. So I knew that I needed to get out there and mentally have a longer run than that in the bank. And we've got a route around Rutland called the Rutland Round. I'd done little bits of it and walking, but never really been on most of it. So I didn't know what I was letting myself in for. But it's 66 miles. And so I set out on Saturday morning with a view to running the whole of the Rutland Round, 66 miles. But that was my stretch goal. So my stretch goal was to run the whole thing. My minimum goal was to get past 30 miles, because there is a chance that the organizer of the Arc 50 come back and say, if I haven't done a 30-mile, in the documentation it says if you haven't done a 30-mile race, then they won't let you enter. So I needed to have at least a 30-miler in the bank. But I also needed to, so I'd got different tiers of goals. I ended up getting up to 41 miles, which was great. And I could have, my next goal after 30 was 50 miles, because then mentally that would make January a little bit easier. What I learned was I could have gone to the 50 miles, but my right knee was not going to do so very happily. And so therefore it was better to save myself, so that I could get my training, carry on with my training, as opposed to run myself to the wall. But I know as a result of Saturday, if that had been a 50-mile run, I could have easily got to 50 miles. The last few miles might not have been very pretty. So I think it's good to have these stretch goals. So we'll actually, when we're setting our business targets, we'll have a stretch goal and a normal goal. We'll set certain principles like people's bonuses on the normal goal, but we're all striving for the stretch goal.
And in terms of the Ironman, at which point, I'm sure there are a lot of people who, if they've got Ironmans coming up or have done any triathlon in the past, would be very keen to know what was the silver bullet that took an extra hour off your goal. Where was the point where you realised it was going even better than you'd expected, and how did you manage, to then reframe and keep that target in place?
I honestly don't know why it went better than I expected, other than I didn't get that much slower. Than what I've worked out is I'm not particularly fast at any of them, but I don't seem to get that much slower the longer I do them. So I'd only ever run one marathon prior to that, and that was about 4 months before. So I'd done the Brighton Marathon in April, and I ran just under 4 hours. And then the marathon that I did in the Ironman was 4 hours and 1 minute. So there was like 3 or 4 minutes different. Now my fitness was definitely better by the time I did that Ironman, but still I would have I'd been told to expect to gain an extra half an hour on my normal marathon time when doing it in an Ironman, and it didn't pan out that way. I think probably the biggest reason, you always say with endurance sport, it's not the person who goes fastest, but it's the person that slows down the least. And the best analogy I can give you, which does relate very much to business, is the strategy I used in my run on the marathon. And so in business, I work, and I'm a big believer in this 90-day cycle, because I think you set yourself a target for 1 quarter, but after about a quarter, you start losing energy and enthusiasm, and you need to just kind of put your head above the parapet and say, right, okay, what do I need to do for the next quarter? Because setting 1 year goals in business is great, but you've got to be revisiting them every quarter. And I believe that you should have a day, a quarter working on the business as a minimum, as opposed to in it. So a day a quarter working on the business, and that should include kind of, or coming out of that day with some whole new goals that re-energize you. You've refocused, you've kind of reflected on what was going well, what wasn't going so well, and you've kind of got this new strategy in place. And actually, that was the success behind me not slowing down on the run in the Ironman, because I used a run, walk, run strategy, which so I've been doing some work researching Jeff Galloway, and also listened to a guy called Mitch Phillips, both of which have featured on my Triathlon podcast since. And both use run, walk. Well, Jeff invented the whole run, walk, run strategy, which is why it's known as Jeffing, or the Galloway method. But Mitch had used it to incredible success to deliver a sub-3 marathon.
Which, I mean, that sounds impossible on a run, walk, run, but I love that.
It is. When I was listening to it, I was like, this is amazing. And it made so much sense to do it in a marathon at the end of an Ironman. It just, because you're going to end up walking at some point. Likelihood is you're going to end up walking at some point in your marathon at the end of an Ironman anyway. So better to use it strategically than end up walking for the last 20 minutes of your run. So I was running a 9-minute and then walking for 1 minute strategy. And what was amazing is that when I was super bouncy at the start, I'd obviously stuck myself full of more caffeine. And at the start of the run, I felt amazing. And the run, walk, run was forcing me to slow down. Because it just kept me reflecting. And I was like, oh, I've got to walk again now. What do you mean? I don't feel like I want to walk. But it forced me to slow down. And that, I'm sure, saved me from myself. But then in probably the last 6 miles, where I'm starting to have those pretty dark moments, it was also the thing that kind of kept me mentally re-energizing and going, do you know what? I've only got to think about running for another 7 minutes and then I can walk again. I've only got, another 9 minutes. And, at the start, the 9 minutes were flying by and the 1 minute was quite irritating. At the end, the 9 minutes seemed to be going on forever. But ultimately, all I was thinking about was the 9 minutes, not, I've got another 6 miles to go or whatever it is. So I think that was the secret to not slowing down on the run anyway. With the cycling, I don't know, I just seemed to go fast. I was just comfortable going faster than I expected to be.
So that run walk it forced a point. I like that point you made. It saved you from yourself, as in there can be a tendency, it rears its head, particularly in endurance sports, where when you're feeling good, you go hard. But the risk of that is you're not going to be able to go hard later because it's going to be a long day. By throwing in that 1 minute, you were forced to actually execute a much better pacing strategy than you may otherwise have done, particularly given it was only your second marathon.
Yeah, definitely. And it works exactly the same in business. If you don't kind of reassess your goals, you get so enthusiastic about something, you charge off and you end up doing something completely different and ending up somewhere completely different to what you originally set out. So it's just about that kind of recorrecting, reassessing, reflecting, refocusing, and genuinely re-energizing yourself so you're enthusiastic for the next stage, whether that's the next 9 minutes of running or whether that's the next quarter in business.
And on that idea of enthusiasm, clearly from the moment that you walked across the coals at Tony Robbins' event in the XL in London, and you came out of that, you were, I imagine, pretty clear on why you were going to be making these changes in your life, why you wanted to start cycling, ultimately why that led you to Ironman. But that sort of sense of purpose, do you feel there was a connection? I think it's something you've already mentioned, that there is a connection between the way you've dealt with that in business and the way you then rolled that out into this next phase of health, fitness and Ironman.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the best business marketing books out there is Simon Sinek's Start With Why. So when it comes to our marketing, we want to, you always want to start with why, not what you do, but why you do it, because people buy into it far more. Same with regards to your team and the culture. If your team understand why you're doing what you're aiming to do, they will, they'll be a far better team. And one of the things that I found from interviewing successful sports people on my podcast is that knowing your why is one of the, particularly in the endurance world, where you're going to go through some dark times, knowing your why is so important, because that's what gets you through those dark times and keeps you moving, when really it would be easier and far more preferable just to stop. When you're, in those dark moments, really struggling, knowing your why is really powerful, and that's what keeps you going.
I mean, just in case that sounds a bit woolly to people, it's as simple as you're in that moment and you're asking yourself that question: why am I here? It might have been you wanted the medal, or you like the sport, or you love cycling or running, whatever it is your sport is. Why am I here? And you need an answer to that question. Otherwise, when it really, really hurts, you might not keep going.
Yeah, and one of the people, and I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember which person at the moment. It might come back to me in a minute. But one of the people I interviewed on the Triathlon Podcast was saying about how they'd lost a friend of theirs to cancer when they were in their 30s. I think it might be Kerry Sutton, but I might be wrong on that. And any time they were in a dark moment on the run, they were like, no, I'm choosing to do this. This, my friend would have given anything to be here having the choice to do this or not. So just getting on with it is important. And speaking to athletes about mindset on endurance stuff, the why is so important. If you clearly know your why, well, to steal Viktor Frankl's words, he who knows his why will withstand almost any how. And so if you know your why, you'll make it through.
And for you, what was at the heart of that why that was driving you through that Ironman and beyond?
What was the why behind the Ironman? Well, I suppose I would still link it back to that same UPW realization that if I want to create the best future for me and my family, then I've got to be in the best shape possible. And yeah, it still is that fear of that 1-bedroom flat surrounded by pizza boxes weighing 20 stone. It's that compelling vision that Tony's indoctrinated into my brain. But Tony says if you go and speak to somebody that's a smoker, they would and say, look, give up smoking. They would say, well, yeah, it's difficult and I've tried and it didn't work. And then you put a gun to their head and say, now give up smoking. Suddenly it seems really easy. And it's all about leverage. It's all about making sure that it's important enough. And if you know your why and you know why it's important, then you'll get on and do it. It's like, there's always, if it's raining, you've got up at this time of year, you've got up early, it's dark, it's wet, the wind's blowing, you're going, I don't really want to go for a run now. In fact, I'd far prefer just to roll back over, cuddle in and just stay in bed and forget the whole running idea. But if you know your why, then that's what gets you out of bed and gets you out on that run.
Because otherwise the pizza boxes are going to come and get you. And every run, every time you get up is a reaffirming fact. I am not the bloke with the pizza boxes. I am the bloke I want to be.
Although the ironic thing is that my meal of choice after any long endurance effort is pizza. And in fact, when we get down to Cornwall, because hopefully you're joining me for this ARC 50, I'm gonna treat you to the best pizza you'll get in Cornwall. It might not be the best pizza you've had in Italy, but the best pizza you'll have in Cornwall.
That I have to say, I have a great weakness for pizza after serious amounts of exercise. So I have absolutely no problem with that. And one of our top secret development projects, we haven't been able to unlock it yet, is how do we bring the pizza moment into a totally whole food based sports nutrition solution. I've seen a couple of people have tried in the past. Quite big brands have had some wild card attempts, and it's this kind of baby food that tastes like pizza. It's absolutely diabolical. It's as bad as it sounds. But maybe pizza cannot be turned into sports nutrition, and maybe we shouldn't try. But no, I think
maybe we should just leave it for our recovery meal.
Maybe we can make a recovery product out of it. But you're right. It's got to be fresh. I look forward very much to a bite of that. Now on the team side of the why, though, it's great if, as the leader of your business or as the competitor in your Ironman, you are absolutely dead set on your why and your mission. But as many a business leader and cheesy movie has said ever since, there's no I in team. Although a few smart asses might say there's a me. But there isn't.
Beat me to it.
It's no point if you're doing this on your own, then you might still end up on your own in the one-bedroom flat. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think if you want to achieve as much as you can in business and have the greatest impact, whatever it is that you do in business. So for me, my primary business is helping people have a better financial future. And if it just stays as me doing that, there's only so many people I can help. But if I build a team up around me, and to start with, that was a team that just allowed me to spend more time doing the individual one-to-one financial planning. So it kind of was exaggerating the impact I could have. But gradually, as we've grown as a business, actually, that we've now got a team of financial planners that are doing it and following my approach. A team means that we can have a far, far greater impact. But what we can also do is have people with far greater expertise in different areas, people that are far better at certain things than I am. So, for example, we use a thing called the Colby A index, which is how we don't employ anybody before we have a Colby A index profile on them. And it tells us things like whether they're a risk taker or not, whether they're very good at finishing processes or not. You probably won't be surprised to hear that I am a 9 out of 10 on the risks scale, so typical entrepreneur. But my follow through, how good I am at finishing a process, I'm horribly low. I think I'm a 2 or a 3 on it. So I need a team of people around me that are going to make sure that they finish the process. So it's about designing a smart team. And that really, it applies to sport as well. So for example, when I was, in two ways really, one is the team of people that you train with, your tribe, as we call them in triathlon. So, having the people around you that can support you in your training is really important. Then you've also got your team as in the family, because if you're going to train for an Ironman and your family aren't on board, well, one thing's going to go badly. I'm not sure which, but one of them is going to go badly. It reminds me of that. I saw somebody holding up a sign, not at the Ironman Italy, but it was at a different Ironman, that said, if you're not divorced, you've not trained hard enough. Which seemed a little extreme, but I can see where they were coming from. But also in terms of your team, you've got to find people that have experienced this stuff already. So bringing in people, Henry Ford always used to say that he employed people that were smarter than him in different areas, and that's absolutely the right approach with your sport as well. And so bringing in a coach, so I was lucky enough within my tribe, the guys I was swimming and cycling with, to have a guy that had done Kona World Championships 11 times. Last year he was world champion in his age group twice over. So really experienced triathlete. And he was kind enough in exchange for free pork pies and lunches to be my coach. And he was the one that was building all the Training Peak stuff, giving me the targets, telling me what to do, eliminating so many mistakes. Like the week before I went out, he happened to mention salt tablets. So salt tablets, never even thought about that. But I have no doubt that I would have cramped horribly, particularly given how hot it was in Italy, if I hadn't had those salt tablets. And it's those unknown unknowns that a coach can save you years of learning from. And so, yeah, it's about having the right team around you.
Actually, there you've given me a beautiful segue into one of the next points, which is that idea of having a coach, and both in business and in sport. Professional sport, people have coaches, but a huge number of business people sort of don't. I think entrepreneurs are more likely to, but it's that idea that you're never the finished product. You've never stopped learning. And it sounds like from when we were talking earlier, your experience of learning and growth and development through coaching and external influences in business was also something that helped you as you transitioned into moving through sport.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in business, the strategic coach program was hugely influential on how I grew my business, and I'm still part of the strategic coach program, still do my workshops every quarter. So that's been really helpful. From a personal point of view, I would consider Tony Robbins to be my coach. Now, clearly he wasn't my personal coach. I've been lucky enough to meet him in person once, but he certainly wouldn't know who I was. But he was still my coach, but through the mechanism of his business mastery course, his Unleash the Power Within stuff. So I've had these coaches, and yeah, when it came to doing my first Ironman, I was totally clueless as to what I should or shouldn't be doing. So finding somebody that knew, but even so taking Roger, the guy that was my coach leading up to the Ironman. He's done Kona 11 times. He still has a coach. Tiger Woods, best golfer that's probably ever walked the planet, he always still had a coach. All the best people have a coach. So for me, that it's really important that you have a coach to both in your business life and in your personal life.
Well, you can also accelerate that. You are going on the journey for the first time, but someone else has been there before. Whether it is starting a business, okay, your business may be unique, but it isn't like no one ever designed a business online or with an app or with a product and sold it. It's been done before. You can shortcut that learning. You don't have to do it all from scratch. And same with sport. And it sounds like that's what you did. And what a great source to have with your training partner.
Yeah, it was fantastic, and I was very lucky to have that on tap. But to be training with, I was swimming with him 2 or 3 times a week, and cycling with him kind of probably once a fortnight. So to actually be training with the person that's kind of overseeing your coaching as well was brilliant. But yeah, had he not been there, I think I can't see that I would have been able to do it without going and finding another coach. So yeah, I think it was a huge. Had a huge impact on the outcome, I suppose.
And I just wonder, I don't know that this one would be business related, but training with someone that experienced, do you think the simple experience of being with that person, seeing how they cycle, seeing how they pace, seeing how they run, seeing how they swim, did any of that rub off on you, do you think? Do you think you were able to absorb things there, literally that direct physical comparison?
Yeah, definitely, and it does have a direct business comparison as well, because I've always said I want to constantly be a small fish in a big pond, because as soon as you feel like you're the big fish in the pond, you stop learning. Whereas when you're a small fish in the big pond, you keep looking at these people above you, going, oh my goodness, aren't they doing an amazing thing? How are they achieving that? And you learn so much more as a result. And yeah, exactly. I mean, when I started swimming with them, we have 2 lanes of swimming. I was the slowest by a long way in the slower of the 2 lanes, and I got over time to being probably the 3rd or 4th fastest in the faster of the 2 lanes, and that is just from absorbing what they were doing. Same with cycling. For a long time, I was just desperately trying to hang on to their tail, just trying to not embarrass myself or slow them down. But yeah, what they're doing has rubbed off on me, and now I'm, I wouldn't describe myself as one of the strongest cyclists in our group, but I'm certainly not one of the weakest either. And that's exactly what's going on. And in fact, really, if I think about it, my cycling and my swimming improvements have been the things that have improved quickest. And I'm sure that's because of exactly that principle. My running, I do all on my own, and probably my running has not accelerated as much as it might have done had I been training with with running buddies as well.
So it's interesting that, because it sort of subconsciously, I believe, frames your goals, because it's fine if you're watching, let's take the golf analogy. If you're going to go and play golf and there's Tiger Woods, I get it. He's a human being. I'm a human being. Yes, technically we should be able to do the same things, but he's been playing golf since the age of 3, and I'm probably not going to get there. But to be with people who really push you and show you that, you could look at them and go, well, if we're a similar age, okay, you might have been training longer or this, that, and the other. We're a similar age. We're in similar condition, or I could get into that sort of shape. You're able to go, well, I don't see why I couldn't do that. And so much, particularly in endurance sport, is mental, and specifically in business as an entrepreneur as well. It's a very big mental game. Whereas if you can see people like you doing it, then you're like, there isn't a reason why I shouldn't be able to do that.
That's exactly right. And golf is a perfect example. When I'm playing golf, if I'm playing with somebody that's got a handicap of 1, almost guarantee that I'm going to have a better round than I am when I'm playing with somebody that's playing off 24. Because you're mentally, you're absolutely right in that you see other people doing this stuff and you go, well, why can't I do that? And that's, again, a lot of the ultra runners say exactly that. They say, look, I could see other people doing it, and without being arrogant, if they can do it, I can do it. Kerry Sutton definitely said that when she went on to do the Marathon des Sables. She was like, if these other people can do it, I reckon I can do it too. And so it is, and I think you become the average of the people you spend most time with. So I always think, well, okay, how do I make sure I spend enough time with the people I want to most be like, the people that have got the right habits, the right approach to life. And if you do that, so I think that's a great way of thinking about life, is that, look, if I want to improve myself, again, it's one of the reasons why you want to be a small fish in a big pond, hang out with the people that you look up to and respect, and you'll become more like them.
And then as a last point in here, we've got marginal gains, which is something that's been done to death in business that I particularly enjoyed. In sport. Clearly, Dave Brailsford, Team Sky, now Ineos, are known for it. You almost can't say that team word without saying marginal gains. But actually, if you were to read Clive Woodward's autobiography and story of the England World Cup, actually he was doing that before Ineos. I suspect that Dave Brailsford read that book before then, adopting the approach there. And I'm sure someone else had done it before then. But is that something, because it's something you've mentioned as something that carried over from business, where did you see the business application, and how did you then gain clarity on it as you moved into sport?
So we had a principle within the business called our energy meetings. So once a month, as a team, we're having a meeting where we're working on the business rather than in the business. And that's the whole team. And although we've actually remodeled it slightly, so now we kind of tend to do some as a whole team and some as sections of the team as we've grown. But one of those meetings was what we called a 10 by 10 by 10, which essentially could be just called the marginal gains meeting, really. But in fact, I might really rename it because it's better. But the 10 by 10 meeting is where we spend an afternoon looking at every step of the client journey. So where does the client get introduced to us from? And then what's their first meeting with us all about? What happens between there and the next meeting? Every step of the client journey, and breaking it down into quite a lot of levels. And then for each one of those levels, we want to work out how can we make it 10% better. So 10% more efficient, 10% more profitable, 10% quicker, or 10% better. And the reason that we do that is because if you go through that whole list of processes and that whole client journey and find ways that you can improve each step by 10%, you don't end up with a 10% gain. You end up with a kind of massive, like 200% gain because of the compound effect. And it's this particular meeting that I put down to us growing our new business levels by 50% for 6 out of 7 years. And so that is that looking at every bit of the process. And the same applies in sport, doesn't it? I mean, yes, you're absolutely right. The whole marginal gain things has been done to death. But, you know, as an amateur, as an age grouper, we can still be looking at, well, okay, how can I make sure that I'm getting enough sleep? How can I make sure I'm eating the right stuff? How can I make sure I'm using the right equipment? You know, it's just looking at all of those different things and working out how you can improve each bit by, say, 10%, because the compound effect of that will be massive. And that's certainly what I did when I went from doing so in year 2 of that 3-year journey to doing Ironman, I did my second half Ironman, but I applied a much more scientific approach to it. I went off and, you know, looked at a whole load of different things, and, you know, again, I tried to apply that marginal gains principle, and I was expecting to take something like 15-20 minutes off my first half Ironman time. I ended up taking 45 minutes off it because of all of the compound effect of those different elements. So yeah.
Well, I say a lot of those things. It can be easy in business to be focused on one element, whether it's sales or marketing or funding or product, whatever it may be. And you can lose sight of the bigger picture because there's a lot of other elements that make a business tick. Similarly, the Ironman is swim, bike, run, and you better get your transitions right as well. But your training is a small portion of your day. What does the rest of your day look like? Where are the other? It's not just how hard you can train. You've got to recover. Well, that's sleep, that's nutrition, that's mindset. What are the other stresses in your life? Like, did you take that similar sort of high level view? You talk about working on your business as opposed to in your business. Did you take that thing, rather than working in your Ironman, doing the training, work on your Ironman, look at the whole thing and find out where are the non-specific training elements or whatever that can actually give you the huge gains, or the sort of low-hanging fruit that was probably sat there waiting to be picked?
Yeah, I did, and I applied the same approach that I do with anything in business, and that is, right, what books can I read? What podcasts can I listen to? Who do I know? I suppose Dan Sullivan has a principle which is who, not how. So who can I find? Are they an author? Are they a podcaster? Are they a friend? Who can I find that can help me achieve this goal? Not how do I achieve it, but who. Because as you pointed out earlier, there's loads of people that have got, wealth of experience in these different areas, whatever it is, whether it's business or sport, that have been there, done it. They've got the t-shirt, they've worked out, they've made all the mistakes. So why go through and make all the same mistakes as opposed to just learning from their mistakes? So I tend to get through about a book or two a week. And I do that even though I'm dyslexic and a horribly slow reader, because I listen to books. So I'll listen to books when I'm on the bike. I'll listen to books when I'm running, also in the car, although that doesn't happen very often at the moment. So, just absorbing as much information as you can, and that allows you to accelerate what you achieve. And I'm a really big believer that if you're not learning, you're dying. If you're not growing, you're dying. And so whether it be in your sport, whether it be in your business, you've got to be looking constantly at how can I find people that have done this before, learn from it, and how can I learn and accelerate my growth. And Jim Rohn once said, who was Tony Robbins' coach right back before, when he was young. He said, I'll give you a guaranteed strategy to be wealthy beyond your dreams 25 years from now. And that strategy was to read a book a week. And I think the same can apply in sport as it can in business. If you go out and find those books and podcasts, but books in particular, because podcasts, I don't know, actually. I think the podcast world has got better and better, actually. And there's so much that you can learn from both now, that you can massively accelerate your progress by using them as a resource.
And to a degree, it's a marginal game right there. It's not like we all need to be on all the time, but there are large portions we all have in the day. I would say commuting. There's not a lot of that going on right now, but you're walking to the shops, you're in the shower, you're doing whatever. Now, it's very easy now. Stick on a podcast, stick on an audio book. The amount of freely available. You go back to sort of the Henry Ford generation, and people talked about, well, the world's knowledge is in your library. It's amazing. You just have to go to the library and borrow it. Well, we don't even need to do that anymore. You can have the knowledge of whoever you like. They've done a podcast, they've got an audio book, they can be talking directly to you within 5 minutes of you having it downloaded. And on that subject, if people want more of you, then they should be heading over to your own podcast, your Triathlon Podcast.
Yeah, so the Triathlon Podcast was something that was born out of lockdown, actually. So me and a friend have been developing an app called Triathlon, which will help people find events, help people find people to train with, and also then help you identify where which events your friends are entering or your tribe are entering. So that, because we all know that if you enter a triathlon or a run where you've got mates that are doing it, it's a lot more fun than doing it on your own. So the podcast, the app is in development. It should already be live now. It's not quite, but it should be any week now. But in lockdown, I thought, well, actually, a great way to promote this would be to put together a podcast. Didn't expect to get that many great people on there, and it's been fantastic. We've got some incredible names on there, including your good self. But it's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed it, and it actually comes back to another principle that I talk about in entrepreneurial happiness, which is how can you merge business with fun? So I love learning about how we can improve as athletes. And so the Triathlon Podcast has been an amazing learning journey for me on this particular subject. And so I've genuinely loved it. And I was interviewing Shane Benzie yesterday, the running coach, having just finished reading his book, The Lost Art of Running. Absolutely brilliant guy, full of incredible knowledge on how you can improve your running. And I was just happy as Larry, chatting away to him, learning from him. And so I think if you can work out how you can merge business with fun, and what you enjoy. And there's other ways you can do that. In my financial planning business, there's a conference that happens in the US. So what I do is I fly out there a day or two early, and I'll typically hire a bike and I'll just head off and cycle around, Malibu for a day, or Palos Verdes for a day. Or when it was in Florida, I did a day's cycling, but the cycling in Florida is not very good. So it's too flat. So then I did another day where I was diving with sharks, because some of the best shark diving in the world is in a place called Jupiter in Florida. So how, and I think it's just worth brainstorming in business. How can you merge business with fun? And the same with your training. How can you merge your training with fun? It shouldn't always be about doing what Training Peak says. It should be about actually getting it. We do this stuff, unless you're expecting to make a career out of it, which I'll certainly never be making a career out of my endurance performances. It is there to be fun, and so how can you make that that training fun?
It's got to be fun, isn't it? Because you're going to put a lot of work into it. And your point there about the training peaks, you don't always have to do what it says to a degree. Consistency, showing up, doing the work is essential in business as it is in sport. But you have to be enjoying it and finding the ways to sometimes go, it's not all about FTP or max heart rate or whatever. I would really enjoy a run of X, or at times I'd really enjoy a day off. You need to be able to strike that balance.
Yeah, definitely. And I found that when I was training for the Ironman and I was doing hill reps, I was like, I'm running up and down the same hill. I live in a beautiful part of the world. I should be out running where I want to be running, not just running up and down this road. And it seemed crazy. So I ended up trying to, being more flexible with my training, just so that actually I was enjoying it more. And I think that's a big part of what we need to do, particularly in business, because you spend so much time doing what you do that you've got to make sure that you're enjoying it.
Well, I hope the rest of the training for the ARC 50 goes well. Clearly, I like the let's just say the risk taking there, because the ARC 50 miles first ultra, that's a reasonable distance, but most people might go for it on the flat. You're doing it on the Cornish coast, and you live in Rutland, which is not known for its mountains. So I look forward to hearing how that's going. And if people want more of your stuff, they can get you at Triathlon. We'll put the links to the podcast out there. I'm also going to put links into a couple of the books you've mentioned, being Tony Robbins, Rich Roll, and a couple of others. So also, are there any social links that people would be able to get you on as well, Charlie?
Yeah, you can find me if you just search for Charlie Redding. You'll find me on Instagram, Twitter. I don't tend to use Twitter that much, but Instagram and Facebook you'll find me on. If you go to charlieredding.com, you will find much more about me and all my links there. That's probably the easiest thing. And you can also download a free copy of The Dream Retirement from there, and the first three chapters of Entrepreneurial Happiness as well. So if you go to charlieredding.com, you'll find out all you need to know about me and find any links that are on the platforms that work best for you. And if you want to find out more about Efficient Portfolio, then that's at efficientportfolio.co.uk.
We'll put that one in there as well. And in terms of those books, anyone who might be thinking, well, retirement's not quite for me yet, that's sort of probably why you need to read The Dream Retirement. It's not your average financial advice book. Let's just put it that way. Charlie, thank you so much for coming on. Really enjoyed the crossover there, and so nice to spin the business lessons into sport rather than sport lessons into business for a change.
I always found a great idea in terms of the subject, and it was a brilliant opportunity to chat to you. So I really enjoyed it too. Thank you very much for getting me on.
So there you have it, folks. Charlie Redding, give that man a big hand. He really brought a ton of value there. And I know there were so many different things that were referenced during that show. Fear not. Get down into the show notes below. You'll find links for all of those resources. And whatever you're doing, make sure you stop by 33fuel.com for the best in natural sports nutrition. No additives, no junk. No ultra-processed ingredients, no things you can't pronounce, just the finest, tastiest, most powerful ingredients in nature, made into the best bars, the best protein powders, the best energy gels, the best drink mixes you have ever found anywhere. And all of it comes with a full money guarantee if you are not completely blown away. So look, get to 33fuel.com, get stacked up, and we look forward to seeing you on the next show. Thanks for joining.